Fenrir by J.T. Lawrence. Norway, 835 A.D. "Bring us some more wine, boy," says Halstein, emptying his drinking horn as if it's a thimble of dandelion dew. Stig doesn't need to be asked twice. He scampers down the hall. Kolborn approves. "May as well finish our supplies before tomorrow's expedition," Halstein says. His face is full of firelight. His voice is as big as his barrel chest. He fills his horn again with his clumsy bare hands, neither noticing nor caring how much of the expensive drink he spills. "To the feast!" "Aye," shouts Fisk. "To the feast! Skull! Skull! Skull!" The cheers rise in the air like arrows. Kolborn joins in the merriment despite the feeling of dread in his bowels. He looks around him, as if for the first time, as if he is a stranger in this long room, which is usually as familiar to him as his own house. He gazes with a new flicker of tenderness at Stefnir. His wife catches his eye and swings her foot, kicking his ankle with a grin. He watches Stig heave another great log onto the red coals. When did the boy shoot up like that? He was just yesterday a babe, mewling and suckling, growing like cotton grass in summer. Now the imp is as tall as a crucible sword. The Norse men, women, and children are all painted warm by the flames of the hearth and in their heads. All manner of food is set before them: pickled duck eggs, cracked and marbled with beet, salted seal meat, horse fillet from the roasting spit. Stig hurries back to the table, balancing 2 bottles of wine as carefully as if his life depended on it. Halstein takes them from the barefooted boy and rewards him with a back pat that nearly sends him flying. He stumbles on the woven wattle of the floor, but he is smiling. "Come here," says Stefnir. People usually listen to Stefnir, even those not of her womb, even those older and stronger than she. Before Stig reaches his mother, Kolborn lunges for him, drags him, protesting, onto his lap. He musses the straw on his head that passes for hair, his mother's hair. "My eyes, though," thinks Kolborn, "and my nose. It's fairer on him than it is on me." Halstein leers at Stefnir. "Give the boy some mead." "He's too young," says Stefnir. "He hasn't yet seen 5 winters." "Too young?" booms Halstein. "I was fighting Saxons when I was his age." "Aye, aye," she says, stretching her neck. "I'm sure you were." The clanspeople laugh. "I was," he says. "They used to call me Stalwart Stein. My job was to spear the heads of the monks." Stig looks up at the man, lips ajar. "Father would give me a copper coin for every skull I spiked," Halstein says. "Before long, I was chopping them down myself. How do you think I got to become a jarl? My purse of St. Peter's started when I was half the size of Stig." Kolborn catches Stefnir rolling her eyes. He runs his hand over her back. "If only your cock was as swollen as your battle tales," says Ingvar. There was a sudden stiltedness in the festivities. Halstein frowns at his wife and at the rest of the table. Ingvar stares back at him, sparks in her eyes. The guests busy their gazes elsewhere, wicker-watching. They know better than to show their mirth. But then he tips his great black beard back and roars with laughter. The others take his cue and do the same. Stig doesn't understand the bawdy humour. Not yet. But he chuckles with an open maw to join in the fun. Kolborn hugs him closer. The boy squirms away and off his father's legs to grab at the honey-smoked hen's leg Stefnir dangles in front of him. "We'll sail before sunrise?" Kolborn asks his leader. Over the years, as Halstein's girth has grown, so has he appreciated his morning slumber more. The next-to-last expedition saw Kolborn having to lever the Norsemen off his bench and onto the longboat, his lolling tongue still black with the previous night's wine. "It's good to leave while the moon is still bright," Kolborn says. "Aye, aye, brother," says Halstein. "And it's a good thing, too, having you keep us on the narrow." Kolborn picks up a sharp hen bone from his wooden bowl and uses it to pick errant flesh from his teeth. Under the table, Stefna palms the hard muscle of his thigh. This is how they speak, mostly. Through skin grazing and gesture. It's the best way, the most honest. Let's get back then, her hands are saying. We don't have much time. I want you to myself. They fuck once near the entrance of their long hall, Stefna pinned up against the door and again in bed on the furs. He watches her astride him, the strength of her body, the softness of her breasts as she climbs towards her zenith. She makes as much music as she likes. Stig has stayed over at Halstein's feast. He wanted to hear the minstrels and gleemen play. Once they are sated, Stefna rolls off Kolborn and cleans herself. She uses her antler comb on her yellow mane. She comes back to bite his chest, to tickle his ribs, and he swats her away. She laughs her lusty laugh, the sound that made him fall in love with her. In moments like this, he wonders what he has done to deserve her. He turns to blow out the tallow candle when she stops him. You'll be careful tomorrow. Aye, he says, always. You'll mind yourself. Of course. Then I'll give you something to take with you. She bites him again, hard, leaving a leaf-shaped mark on his chest. There, she says, rubbing the saliva away. Now you can look at that and think of me. You witch, he says, tormenting your man the night before he sails. Tormenting? Is that what we're calling it now? Kolben laughs. They move closer together, so that Stefna's head rests in the crook of his arm, and they can look facewards. Kolborn's hand lies on his wife's sure hip. She holds his other hand, sex-scented, near her lips. Don't go, she says. That's what you always say, says Kolborn. And I always come back, don't I? With silver and livestock and fur blankets. We have enough of all that. The farm is in good stead. You'll see, come harvest time, how much grain we have to store. We'll have more than enough. Besides, I'd rather have you here than all the silver in Essex. You're forgetting one thing, says Kolborn. I'm a warrior, not a farmer. You could be a farmer. You know it's not like that. I'm Halstein's second. More like you're the leader, and it's only Fat Halstein who hasn't realized it yet. Och, it's true. He's not half the man you are. Everybody knows it. Aye. Well, it's not a sport. He is welcome to his command. You won't stay? Even for Stig? I can't stay, and you shouldn't be asking me to, he says, taking his hand away. Don't be angry. I only ask because I want you. Not like Ingvar, who I'm sure would push Halstein straight out of the door and into the ocean if she could. You're my family. I won't lose my family again. Stefna's mother died birthing her. She had lost her father in a raid. I am not angry, Kolborn says. It's just... She steals his hand back, kisses it. It's just that this time, I feel it too. What? That I shouldn't get on that boat. Stefna pushes herself up on her elbow, makes wide eyes at him. Then for Thor's sake, don't go. There is blood in her cheeks. You know as well as I do that our death days are already decided by the gods. Getting on a boat won't change that. It's just a feeling. A stupid feeling. Maybe you should listen to that stupid feeling. He falls on his back, examines the roof tree. Like I did when I married you, he says. Aye, she says, and look how that worked out for you. She lies back down again, close. She traces the tattoo of the bite mark, then strokes the silver wolf's head on its leather cord on his chest. My Fenrir, she says. My moon snatcher. My lone wolf. The charm, a pretty wolf's head, had been a gift to her from her father. It was all she had of his. On their wedding day, after they had exchanged swords and rings, Stefna had strung the brooch and given it to Kolborn. He had uttered the beginning of a refusal, but she had insisted and had tied it around his neck herself. It feels right, she had said. Do you feel it? And he had. He still does. He calls it his lucky charm. Now Stefna moves to blow out the flame. "No," he says, stopping her. "I want to look at you." The candle burns all night. At first light, the longboat is keen and gleaming with its new clinker skin. The moulded gunwale is polished with beeswax. The woolen square sail is dry and ready. The air around the Northmen is still blue as they grip their oars. The white-breathed thralls push them into the tide. The men are excited and bang their burnished shields. They exchange happy insults as they row. Kolborn leans against the bulwark and swallows the last of the elderberry tonic Stefna prepared for him hours earlier. It was green with fresh peppermint from their farm to help settle his stomach, which never enjoyed the roiling of the sea. "Drinking your witch's potion again," says Halstein, uncharacteristically bright-eyed for this time of morning. Perhaps last night they had run out of ale. "Aye," says Kolborn, throwing the empty swine bladder into the sternhold. "Lower the flags," he shouts, and the seafarers lower the handsome gold-woven raven banners. The two black birds of blood fall down as if being put to sleep. Hugin and Munin, thought and memory, are laid to rest so that the men can approach the Saxons without alerting the sentinel. Although he has seen this many times before, the image stays with Kolborn. Something feels different. A premonition that one way or another, this will be his last expedition. "Now hear ye, men," shouts Halstein, half an hour away from their landing spot. "It's time to get clear of purpose." "Aye, aye," say the Vikings. They blow their noses into the sea and rotate their shoulder cuffs. Their feet won't stay still. "Before ye grab ye breastplates and blades," says Halstein, "I want ye to hear me." The men keep moving their limbs, keeping supple, but their attention is now on their leader. "We'll be landing on the Isle of Sheppey where you know we invaded last spring." "Aye," says Fisk. "It was a good haul, Sheppey." "Aye," say the Norse raiders. "Aye." "Now, we were very kind to them then and didn't spill much blood, but they will be better prepared this time. They'll have weapons and a plan." The pirates nod and flex their bodies. "This time you will show no mercy, no hesitation. I won't lose one man, you hear? Not a one." "Aye," the men say. "You hear me? Is it clear to ye? No mercy." "Aye," shout the seafarers. "No mercy. I want ye to kill every man you see, take what they have, and do what ye will with the wenches." The men whistle, showing their tongues and pant like horny dogs. Fisk humps the dragon-fashioned stern, and there is high laughter. "I want ye men to frighten every Saxon you see. Knock the heads off the men. Terrify the women and children." "Hold on," says Kolborn, tasting the salt in the air. "Hold on. Why will we now hurt the women, the children?" "Because, Kolborn, the more we scare them in this battle, the less resistance we will find in the next." Halstein lifts his bare claw in Kolborn's direction. The men quiet down. "You have a problem with my tactics? Speak now." "I don't agree with wounding the women unless they pose a danger." "Ah, lads," Halstein says, fingering his beard. "Get out your big fat tears. Take your whales out of your pockets. It looks like our Kolborn here has grown a cunt." The warship glides onto the tide-flattened beach with a whisper of polished wood greeting sand. The anchor, a rock lashed to a branch and fixed there, is lowered into the shallow brine. The spear-armed men hop off the stern with unexpected grace and fly up the dune like marauding monkeys. Steel glints, even the seagulls are silent. Kolborn pats his helmet down onto his head and runs along the beach, just ahead of the other marauders. He begins to feel the adrenaline, the vibrating energy in his limbs. The part of him that is happy husband and loving father separates from his body and flies above him like a calfskin kite. That part cannot do the job of the warrior. That part cannot endure the shock of war. He feels the hot blood beginning to beat in his ears. He sniffs. He gnashes his teeth. He is animal. He is Fenrir. The first of their victims are fishermen taking stock of their day's haul. 5 men smelling of cod and seagrass fall to the earth at the same time, hands wrapping around the strange new arrow shafts planted in their chests as the tangs shock their hearts. More fishermen, and more well-placed arrows until they reach the settlement of huts and halls with turf for roofs. A woman, stirring the steaming contents of an iron cauldron atop a kindling fire, looks up and sees the army. She drops the spoon and screams until an arrow finds a way into her chest. Now their shroud of silence falls to the ground. The raiders shout and bite their shields. Spears wing through the air, cries both shrill and deep pierce the land along with swords and spikes and long-handled axes. Creamy throats are split open, bodies fall into mud. Colborne cuts down his 12th Christian, a padded man who was swinging some kind of stick at him. Colborne feels no fatigue in his sword arm or in his fighting spirit. Here is another Saxon who doesn't stand a chance. Colborne impales the man without hesitation or pity. All around him there is shouting and moaning and the clashing of steel on steel and steel on bone. Red ribbons of blood spurt skywards like a gory maypole dance. Meaty maroon mixes with mud. Colborne kills another man and another. He has a dark power rushing through him. He is a giant. He is a conqueror. He is in the prime of his life. He stabs a curly-haired leather tanner and a blacksmith in a scorched tunic. The darkness is like a swarm of black bees in his veins, in his head, pushing him to keep killing, keep plundering. It's like a pair of giant bat wings driving him forward. He slashes and steals and stabs until he is ankle-deep in greasy clay and treasure and still warm bodies. And then there is a woman's face in his, her cheeks smeared with soil and crimson. She won't let him enter her hut. He pushes her aside, but she is stubborn and flings herself back into his path. He smacks her head hard, and she cries out and falls at his feet. Even so assaulted, she hangs onto his legs to hinder him. Colborne is overcome with fury. The black bees pour into his head, blotting out all reason and rationality. He bends at the knees and roars. "Terrify the women," he hears Halstein yell. It is a requisite, a battle tactic. It will cause future fights to be less cruel. It will mean less blood leaking into the ground. It's his duty to show this wench her place. The fury makes him kick the woman up, off his shins, and he grabs her arms and jettisons her against a giant standing rock. "No!" she screams into his face. Her ear is bleeding from his blow. Colborne squeezes her against the stone, a warning to stay back now while he raids her hut. He loosens his grip and turns towards her home. "No!" she screams again, falling after him, and Colborne loses his temper. "Terrify them!" a phantom Halstein roars in his ear. The bees in his head and veins buzz wildly and take over his body. He slams her against the rock again and tears off her shift, revealing full, white, milky breasts. Before he knows it, his cock is in his hand, and he is forcing it under her dress and into her flesh. She cries out in horror and in pain. She scrabbles at his neck, tries to dig her nails into his throat. He grips her hands and pins them back against the stone while he finishes attacking her. There is no pleasure in his orgasm. It feels obligatory, like a spurt of warm blood once an artery has been ruptured. Colborne pulls away and tucks himself back into his trousers. His anger is gone. He feels disorientated. Did this just happen? The woman's mask of horror assures him that it did. He will plunder this home now. He will get what he has fought for. She tackles him, grabs hold of his ankle. There is no anger left in him. He hauls her up and headbutts her with his iron helmet. She melts away into the mud. "Brenna!" comes the call. "Burn! Burn! Burn!" It's time to go and leave the village afire. The homes all around him become lamps. Suddenly, whatever wealth this particular hut hides no longer appeals to him. He wants nothing of it. No reminder of today's battle. He feels the need to flee, to get back to the longboat and seawater and just row, 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 until they are at home and at peace and he can hold his wife and son again. His neck is bleeding. His fingers come away incarnadine. The skin on his throat is a knotwork pattern of fingernail cuts. How will he explain it to Stefnir? Fisk marches past, handing him a flaming brick of hay. Kolborn holds the firelight to the thatch of the hut, lights it in 3 places. Let it burn, he thinks. Reduce it to ashes. I never want to think of this day again. The roof begins to crackle in steam. There is a searing surge of furious flame. The fire gains momentum quickly like a body rolling down a hill. Pieces of fire drop down into the interior and eat up what is inside. Kolborn feels the wall of heat against his chainmail, his helmet. He steps back to ease the burn, and as he does so, he hears something, a strange sound. He shakes his head and hears it again. Is it a lamb protesting at being dragged onto the boat? No. It's coming from this bonfire in front of him. A choking sound. Screaming. Was there an animal inside? He steps forward again to look through the tiny opening in the wall. His armor takes on the heat of the fire and bites into his skin, blistering his torso and forehead. That's when he sees the wooden crib on fire, sees the crying baby in it. His instinct is to barrel into the furnace, scoop the burning baby up, but he knows it's too late. Too late for the baby, who dies right then before him as the house turns into a ball of fire. Too late for the baby's mother, whom he has all but destroyed. Too late for himself, because all his loving and valorous moments fall away like old scales as this horror becomes his defining moment, and he cannot live with that. Cannot bear a future of looking backwards, of seeing this window-framed picture of cruel, burning cot, cradle set on fire by his very hands. He won't be able to bear touching Stefnir or Stig with these self-same hands. And what is a life if he can't do that? He grabs at his injured throat for the silver wolf's head. He needs to touch it to remind himself of who he is. But it is gone, torn off in the assault. He has lost it because he didn't deserve it anymore. He falls to his knees and pushes his hand into the mire. He trails his finger through the blood and sand, hoping to rake up the leather thong. Fire falls all around him, as if from the sky, from the gods. The smoke makes his eyes water, and tears stream down his battle-streamed face. As he sinks further down, his hot armor's cooled by the mud. His soul keens. Fenrir is lost. That is how Halstein finds Kolborn, weeping in the dirt. Well, Halstein says, leaning against the great standing stone and taking in the unconscious woman and the defeated warrior, admiring the bruising on both. Isn't this a pretty picture? Kolborn has offered Halstein a hand up on so many occasions, when Halstein has found himself sprawled on the wattle, post-feast, wine-drunk. Halstein does not return the favour. Everyone is on the warship, he says, spoils included. All there but one. Go, says Kolborn. Go without me. Halstein spits on the ground. No, he says. I won't. It won't end like this. Just go, says Kolborn on his knees. I didn't come to find you, to take you back on the boat. Kolborn looks up at him. Halstein is eye-alight in the dusk. White moonshine smoke trails up behind him. His sword is drawn. He looks like nothing less than a god. Odin. He has something in his fist. Something he has taken off the rock. A silver charm. Fenrir. Now Fenrir bit off the right hand of his god, says Halstein. Then Vidar laid waste to the wolf. That's the way the story ends. Aye, says Kolborn. That's the way it ends. You would have been better off, says Halstein, if you hadn't challenged me in front of the men, if you hadn't bitten off my right hand. Aye, and, more to the point, I would have been better off if I hadn't married Stefnir. Aye, that was your first and most fatal mistake. My second mistake was trusting a friend, says Kolborn. Halstein laughs. I don't see any friends here. Kolborn braces himself. He thinks of his farm under a clear sky and his impish barefooted Stig. He sees Stefnir's sweet, warm skin as if she is right in front of him. He hears her laugh and feels her biting his chest as Halstein runs his crucible sword through his ribs. The ravens shriek. There is no pain, just the emptying out of the black bees and an exhalation as the evil leaves him. Kolborn has already departed the realm when his body topples over next to the woman's. It will be her sole comfort when she wakes. The end.